Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So exciting time today. Just to kind of set the tone, we're going to go through the application and talk about the technical points, what you need to know going in different sections of the application, and either like some tips or some pitfalls that you might have that I can bring up as well. As we get started, for any MBA application that you're working on, you absolutely want to read the welcome message from the school. Sometimes there's some great stuff hidden in there about how to do your research or anything like that. And I'd also encourage you to start the application ahead of time and do a bit of a preview before you dive into actually working on it. And so you get a little bit of a preview and understand what you need to bring to the table when you want to sit down and work on it for finalization. Other thing would be, by starting your application early, you will also start to get communication from the schools about the different clubs, activities, chat sessions, and ways to engage with their community. So I would absolutely recommend doing that before you actually submit your application. All right, so Stanford, this is all pretty typical of, just a welcome and then their deadlines. They do have a round 3 deadline as well. One thing that I need to kind of mention as a caveat is that I went ahead and clicked on that I was applying to the MBA and the MSX program at the same time so that you could see a little bit of a diversity in the application if you're deciding to apply to like a joint program or anything like that. So that's why it's only presenting those 2 deadlines to me. But there are some additional deadlines that you can apply for. You'll see round 3 in April, and then round 3 for the MSX program. And so they only will have you submit the combo application to both schools on those specific dates mentioned in this combo application if you wanted to apply to both, because some people are on that cusp of like whether they qualify for one or the other program. All right, so here we go. We'll jump back into my application that's already in progress. Again, I can change the dates that the round that I am working on. At any point in time, you are not bound to what you start your application with. So you'll go through the welcome, get to know them, and then the application agreement. One thing about Stanford that they put up front is this honesty and integrity. And essentially they're saying that, you worked on this application and that you didn't get help or use like AI to help you with this as part of the process. And then you will essentially kind of consent to that by putting your name and information into here. We'll see if it lets me progress. Okay, awesome. So just take that seriously and understand it and read it before you submit your application. You might see me walking to the side or looking to the side because I have taken some notes to make sure I cover the biggest things for you throughout the application. So I won't spare you I will spare you the details of going through the basic data. I think you guys can do that all on your own. But there are a couple of things that you may be interested in hearing a little bit about when it comes to, at the bottom, they'll ask about gender identity and sexuality. Pretty much anything that's at the bottom of this application, your nationality, country of origin, passport, like that kind of stuff is technically not going to be taken into consideration when they're selecting candidates. There is an element of, they kind of want to make sure that they do have a balance of international and domestic candidates. So that part will come into play, but not necessarily all these other specifics. It's much more for reporting and understanding who their class is and how to communicate with you. So they do spend a good time asking a lot about your identity. And I would say that if you feel comfortable with it, absolutely share, because what they're going to try to do is connect you with people that show you how their community is embracing and welcoming, and introduce you to resources. So absolutely do that. The other part of this personal information is the additional context. So it's optional. You don't have to do this, but it's a great way to either talk about your background, any kind of challenges you had as, you were growing up in your experiences, and any sort of resilience. The other thing, like an example of this is maybe you were born in the US, but you moved to Germany in high school, and then you ended up going to college in London. And so you're kind of a global citizen and don't have like a true identity of one nationality over the other. And so, that's why you would term yourself a global citizen. Like, you could explain something like that, or anything that could be very interesting to the committee. I know a lot of candidates potentially go to boarding school, etc., abroad, or things like that. So you can share that information there. So family information. So this is where they want to get to know a bit more about you. They want to know if you have a spouse or a family member coming with you, or they're applying to the MBA program. All those types of, all this data kind of helps them with getting to know you, and again, connecting you with the right people and resources. So you can easily add a family member here. You do not have to go and exhaust through this list, but it's up to you as to who you want to include and describe in your application. There's no right or wrong list. Most MBA programs in their application do ask about your parents, and whether they were, they completed or started college, and giving them a little bit of an understanding if you are like a first generation college student, that kind of stuff. So you can kind of share that here. They also want to know if you have any connections to the school, as far as if anybody works at, attended, or graduated from GSB, not Stanford, but GSB. So pay attention to that if you want to add it. All right. Now we're going to move into the application info. So miscellaneous considerations. So obviously, if you have applied before, you want to be able to click this yes button. These applications are quite dynamic. So clicking a specific radio button or something from the drop down will change what you see in the application. We're doing a pretty generic version of the walkthrough today. So if you have something special about your program, you're choosing dual degrees, the Knight Hennessy program, anything like that, there's going to be additional prompts that will come up related to your specific choices. So if you are reapplying, they're going to tell them what you did apply to in the previous time and the years when you did it and what was the decision. And then they also want to know if you're a current or former student of Stanford, and then if you're in the military. So this one is specifically for U.S. military. If you are in the military from another country, that's something you want to I recommend that you include in your personal information or your employment information, and or on your resume as well. And then here we go with the joint degrees. So if you want to apply the Harvard Kennedy School or the Knight Hennessy program, this is your section to where you're going to be talking about this. So dual degrees here, and you're going to tell them about your status and where you feel, how you feel about it, where you're at in making those decisions. Then there are fellowship opportunities specifically for the MSX program. Again, I'm doing a little bit of an extra by doing the dual application. So it'll tell you what this relates to. So for the MSX, there are fellowship opportunities. You want to share what you are most interested in and how you plan to fund your degree. Now, they again ask if you are planning to apply to the Knight Hennessy Scholarship Program, which is open to all GSB candidates, then you would make sure you put your scholarship application number in here, and it has a separate application and due date of October 9th. So that's all something that you want to make sure that you have buttoned up before you submit your application. Next is about any sort of affinity group that you are part of or applying to the program through. And essentially what this is going to equal is likely a application fee waiver or discounted application fee process. And so by checking these, it will definitely help you with that process if you are part of them. If you don't know if you're part of them or if you should join them, then I would absolutely just take this list and search every single one of them and see if you can be a part of them, because they do help with your MBA applications. The consortium is for candidates that are advancing people of color and Latinx or Hispanic or Native American. Forte is focused on women. MLT is very similar to the consortium. Ramba is reaching out MBA, so for the LGBTQ community. And then there's a couple others here. Beyond that, we'll move on to some other basic information, your location, deferral eligibility. So you should not be asking defer unless you are doing the deferred MBA admissions process. So if you're wanting to apply as a high school or as a college senior, then that's the only opportunity for actually deferring. Beyond that, you can't really defer. And then the next part is, how have you interacted with our community? What kinds of activities have you attended or participated in? And this is, they want to know how you've done your research. And so you can kind of click all that, apply. I know that this specifically relates to the MSX program, but you can also make sure that you do the same for the traditional 2-year MBA as well. All right, so moving on to applications. So in this section, they're going to want to know a bit about institutions that you have attended, as well as your grades, etc. So you're going to fill this all out in your graduation date, level of study, and then you will also upload a unofficial transcript. You don't have to send officials in until after you are actually admitted. So that'll be part of the process. You may be asked about your GPA. If you have a GPA outside of the 4.0 scale that the US uses, you'll be mentioning that, or you may have to round your GPA to the closest similarity to the 4.0 scale. And for those candidates that are that have that background, I will say that you want to try your best. Honestly, like there's 1,000 different calculators for figuring out what your GPA is an equivalence of. So try your best to do that. I mean, I wouldn't put, a 4.0 unless it really is close to a, 100%, or I wouldn't put 0 either. But beyond that, I would, try to estimate the best you can. When GSB receives your application, they're going to take their own calculations. They're going to put together different calculations of your quantitative coursework, analytical work, etc., your upper division courses, all that kind of stuff. So they're going to do their own calculations. So you don't have to worry as much that it's not 100% correct. They will be doing their own calculations to assure what you're saying is accurate, and that it's translated for the actual admissions committee making the decisions. The other thing that they want to know is if you were a first-generation college student, so you can kind of share that here. And then this disciplinary action, if you are checking yes, they give you a box. I would say consult with somebody before you fill that box out to get just a little bit of advice about how you can answer those questions. And then they ask you about how you funded your undergrad. So it's interesting that they're doing this because it will factor in potentially to scholarship. And, it also will be the opportunity for them to share if you receive like 100% scholarship as an award or a recognition of your talents or abilities. So the next part is they'll have you put in your awards and honors, and this is specifically as it relates to academics. So there's going to be another section for you to do community as well as professional. So this is strictly academics. And then they do give you an opportunity to share any other coursework that you've done. Certifications, I would definitely use this space instead of listing 5 different certifications on your resume. Save the space on your resume and put it in the application form. Anytime you have the ability to put it in the form, then you give yourself more space to put qualitative information for the committee to be able to get to know more about you. So if you take MBA prep classes, the HBS core, anything like that, it definitely gives them the opportunity to see your academic readiness for the program, especially if you have a little bit of a lower GMAT or GRE score. You can always counterbalance this with like an alternative transcript, etc. And this is where you would put that information. Languages, another great opportunity to save space on your resume. Put them here. Don't put them on your resume. You don't need to. Awesome. Okay, everybody's favorite section, test scores. Yay! So it is required that you take the GMAT, GRE, or for the MSX, you can take the executive assessment. And so you do need to submit your scores. You're going to be submitting you're going to upload your score here. And then once you're admitted, you're going to self-report your scores here. And then once you get you are going to send them officially to Stanford as well. So some schools don't require officials, but it looks like Stanford does want them to be officially sent to them. So have that completed. And the same thing with English proficiency. So they do have some caveats as to whether you need to complete an English proficiency exam or not. And you can read all the details via this link and decide if it's something you need to do. And you'll add your test here. And then the other thing is I have taken the GMAT or GRE more than once. So I don't think that this technically matters as much. Like, I don't think it's going to change your outcome of like whether you're admitted or not. What it does is, let's say that you have a low GRE score, or GMAT score and a high GPA, and your story that you're sharing is, academically, I'm ready. Exams don't necessarily share how I perform on a normal basis. You can look at my GPA and see my performance. Whereas, in a flashpoint on one day for an extreme test, I didn't do as well. And I've tried it multiple times because I'm committed to this. And that's, what they're going to see if you've taken the exam more than once. And you can share those test scores as well. Everybody has their own strategy and opinion about whether you should or shouldn't say that. In the end, for the most part, MBA programs can actually check the system. So my advice is always to err on the side of truth, because there's obviously some checks and balances, and they can reach out to GMAC. They actually have a portal that they can log into and see and verify your scores. And they'll also see number of attempts, not if you discarded your scores, that kind of thing, a little bit different in that way. All right. So next, we're going to move on to activities and interests. So here's a really fun and exciting part, is that you get to add activities during and since college. So this is an opportunity to share an activity that you were part of, and what kind of role or leadership you had. I'm trying to look and see. One of the schools, I know that this section said it's, I guess, the quality of your experience, not necessarily the quantity. So you don't want to add 10 different things that are general membership. You want to add things that are relevant and make sense and demonstrate your teamwork, community service, your leadership and ability to lead a team or anything like that. And it doesn't have to be community related or to be like volunteer experience. If you are part of like a rec soccer league and you organize the team and you're the captain, awesome, use that. That's great, because that's what they're looking for in these activities, for them to be able to see what you do outside of your day-to-day, what kind of capacity you have, and then extra leadership or involvement, not necessarily like community service, but in your community, if that makes sense. They want to see what kind of student and person you're going to be as part of the cohort. All right, moving on. So if you have any honors or awards or recognition socially, this is the place to use it. Remember, there was one of these sections academically. There's one here socially, or kind of as it relates to these activities. You can add it here. And then you'll have one for your professional section as well. All right. Okay, so we're going to move on to professional experience. And so, yay, resume, all that fun stuff. So, word of caution, when we talk about employment information and putting it into the system, I would try to be as accurate as possible, because later on, whenever you are admitted and they are doing the background check, if things are amiss, then you have to resolve them with the background check company, etc. And it just is not super fun. So put the work in now to get it correct on multiple applications, and then you don't have as big of a problem. So the things that they're going to be most concerned about is, the starting month, ending month, and salary and title. So some people kind of have like a bit more of a fancy title on their resume than what their HR title is, or, like I've worked in higher ed and we have the same, like, it was like admissions counselor was my title, but I was an assistant director of admissions, so as my like working title. So those can be different, and that's okay. So just make sure you put the HR title in your actual work experience in the form, because later on when they go to fact check that, it needs to match or be pretty similar. All right, so they're going to ask you about years and months of work experience, and put that in here. And this counts as time that you started working post graduation from your degree. And so you can't count if you started working full-time at the company a month before you started, or the internship rolled over into a full-time role, anything like that. It has to be when you graduated on. And then they'll ask you if you're currently employed. If you're not employed, be prepared to use the optional essay to tell them why not. And in your current or most recent professional role, which of the following best describes your position? So this is them looking at your management and leadership experience. And it's okay if you weren't somebody who was a direct team manager or leader, where you don't have like a director title or anything like that. It's okay. You can still demonstrate your leadership in your resume, and in your, I don't want to say responsibilities, because we don't really use those, but you want to use your accomplishments and how many people were on the team or the team that you led, or if it was indirect, you can also reference that as well. And then this asks if you have any gaps of more than 4 months in your resume. And with COVID, this happened a lot. Layoffs, everything that's going on. So it's totally fine. Don't worry about it. You just need to matter-of-factly write from September 2020 to January 2021, I was unemployed because of layoffs. That's it. You don't have to write anything crazy or anything else like that. If you have questions about that, please let me know. I'm always here to help. All right. And then, have you been disciplined or involuntarily terminated? So if you answer this, then you want to give them a reason as to why. Again, I would consult somebody before you fill that out. And then you're going to go into your work history. The only people that don't have to add anything here would be people doing the deferred MBA. And even with that, they have kind of some caveats for deferred MBA and how you would actually put them into the application form. And then uploading your resume, I would highly recommend that you do it via PDF. And that would be so that the formatting that you work so hard on doesn't get lost because of Word and all of its funkiness, or Google Docs, etc. You want to use PDF, so that's all there. And then again, you have the ability to fill in any awards, honors recognition, spot awards. I forgot, pat on the back is like a couple of other ones that I've heard. So you want to use that here, put them there. And then the next thing is they want to know what your short-term and your long-term goals are after GSB. And then also with the MSX, they want to talk about how you plan to get your job after you graduate, because you're going to be looking for like a senior mid-level role instead of one that's like freshly out of a full-time MBA program. And then what best describes you. So you pick one of these. And then beyond that, what industry do you want to be in and what function? So you have a lot of options here. Definitely pick something. Don't leave it blank. And make sure that it aligns with what you said above as far as what your goals are. And then also matches up with your essays. All right. So now we're moving on to essays. Yay. Again, we're not diving into the specific essays themselves and what it should entail or include, but knowing that GSB has a bit of a different format. So, so they are going to give you some guidelines that you can follow, but don't have to. So 1,000-word limit, and then they recommend that you answer both of those questions within 1,000 words, and they recommend more for what matters most and less for why Stanford. So this is your opportunity to express both of those, and you can use whatever sliding scale you want out of the 1,000 words to put it in there. And then they do give you specific guidelines for how they want this to be formatted, double spaced, number all pages, upload the document includes both essays. And so, make sure you follow these directions, because if you don't, it is a data point for them to consider as well. Okay, so the next section. So it says short answer questions are optional. No, they're not. If they're giving you an opportunity to share more information about you, use it. This is Stanford. You're applying to one of the top MBA programs in the world, one of the top universities in the world. They absolutely need to know more about you to be able to make a decision about why you're a good fit. If you don't take the time to add in these optional essays, then it gives them a data point to say, well, then if there aren't any examples, that's interesting. Or if you didn't want to put the time in to put them there, then that's also interesting. Okay. So the question is, think about a time in the last few years when you've created a positive impact, and that can be professional, extracurricular, academic, or any other setting. And they allow you to use 1,200 characters per example with a limit of 3. So you would add another one, and then you submit. So it's just a text box. So anytime there's a text box in an application form, you want to go and write it in Word, make sure, or whatever editing tool you use, make sure to proof it, check it before you copy and paste it into the application for submission. But that's what you need. You need to take these serious. They're not really optional. The next part is additional information, and that's anything about gap in employment, any sort of thing that you feel like the committee needs to know more about. It doesn't have to be an eloquent essay. It can be short and sweet, as you'll notice my GPA was lower during freshman year. I was having a hard time adjusting and was able to have an upward trajectory of my GPA towards graduation. Something like that, and it's short, simple, and sweet. But that's your opportunity. Letters of recommendation, 2 things. One is that they tell you who they want it from. And then 2, you would add the recommender here, and it does not get sent to them until you push the submit button, send to recommender. So don't feel like you have to submit the application for it to be sent, so you can send it before then. It needs to be submitted by the deadline as well. And then they do have a space for, if you're not using your current boss as a recommender, telling them why. And then the other thing would be, it does ask you in the form if you would want to waive your right to review it. I recommend waiving it, because otherwise it means that if you didn't get admitted, you'll come back and look and read the letter of recommendation and point the finger at the recommender and be like, why did you write this? And you don't want that. And you want the school and the recommender to feel comfortable that the person you selected is going to write something that is positive value add to your application. All right. And then you will proof your application and you can submit it from here. Woo! All right, Shrushi, what questions do we have?
All right, yeah. So can you talk a little bit about the R1, R2 versus R3 deadlines, and if they hurt their chances by applying to one or the other?
So typically there's not that big of a difference in round 1, round 2 for admission and or scholarship, unless there's something very special about it. Certain schools, yes. If they have early action, etc., that's definitely something. But beyond that, they're going to allocate about the same amount of seats to round 1 and round 2 for even a proportion of an audience, whether you come from an overrepresented population. It's still they're not going to admit every single Indian that there is during round one and then not admit any Indians in round two. You're still going to have high chances round one, round two.
And do you have any advice for reapplicants?
Yeah, so they really want to know what the difference is between your last application and your current application. What has changed between then? Scores, work experience, projects, accomplishments, a change in your viewpoint of, career goals. That's what they want to know is, we didn't pick you last time and that application wasn't successful. So what has changed since then? And yes, you should update or refresh your essays. Don't submit the same exact essays the next time.
Thank you, Jen. And one more question about the test scores. What do you mean by a low GMAT or GRE score, and is there a cutoff point?
Okay. So when I say low GMAT or GRE score, I'm talking about compared to the class average. So I just mentioned that the class average for Stanford is around 730, 740. It fluctuates a little bit. And so if your GMAT or the equivalent of the GRE score is a bit lower than that, then you're considered at the low end of the bell curve when it comes to exams. And so they may question your academic readiness. It is only one part of the application that they're looking for to get that information. So you can help supplement that by, if you had a high GPA in a quantitative or a STEM background, that's helpful. If you have taken additional coursework, or you have a highly quantitative and analytical profession, then that's another way that they can affirm that you're ready for the program. If your GMAT GRE score is lower, and I would say that they typically have about a 30-point window that they'll fluctuate on GMAT. It's a little bit different on GRE, like 5 points. But, if you're outside of that 30-point range, then that's when either you should consider retaking the exam, taking another exam, or being able to supplement your score with some other, like an alternative transcript, like taking Coursera classes or even classes for credit in quantitative fields to, again, prove your readiness.
Does Stanford prefer candidates with entrepreneurial background and as a post-MBA goal?
So it's not like you have to have it. It is that it's a good fit for you if that's something you want to do. It's still you're still a strong candidate for Stanford if you have been in banking and want to continue in VC and PE, or if you want to go into to consulting, like that's okay too. So this is almost like sometimes when we talk about like dual degrees or concentrations like the HKS or Harvard Kennedy School for like social good. If you decide that you want to pursue those, it's not going to help your admission to the school. But what it does help is it helps reaffirm why the school is a good fit for you. So you don't have to have entrepreneurship background, but if you do, it helps you reaffirm why Stanford is the right place for you.
All right, thank you. I'm sure the audience found this extremely helpful. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. See you guys.